Just now in the procession of the palms, we celebrate Christ as a king. It's a triumphant procession in anticipation of Easter Sunday. There are people who refer the death of Jesus as a tragedy. It's not so. In ancient Greek tragedy, a man was thought of as being on the wheel of fortune. Once he has risen to the top, the gods spun the wheel to bring the man back to the bottom. And also, as presented by William Shakespeare, tragedy was also the fall of a hero, but his fall was brought about through his own fault because of a flaw in his character. We call it the tragic flaw. The tragic hero was sent to destruction by an unyielding fate, is fated. Jesus was certainly a hero, but his death was only an apparent fall. And his death was not brought about by faith, nor by any flaw in his character. Rather, it was the result of a supreme virtue, his loving obedience to his Father. As we heard in St. Paul's letter to the Philippians, his state was divine, yet Christ did not cling to his equality with God, but emptied himself to assume the condition of a slave. He was humbled yet, even to accepting death on the cross. So on Good Friday, Jesus was, in the eyes of men, a failure. In fact, he was mocked. He saved others, he cannot save even himself. But in the eyes of God, he has completed the life of perfect success because of his loving obedience and patient suffering. The death of Jesus was only an apparent tragedy. On Easter Sunday, God the Father, in raising Jesus from the dead, manifested to the whole world the fact that the death of his Son was a great triumph. Again, we hear in the letter to the Philippians that because of his loving obedience, God raised him high and gave him the name which is above all other names. It was precisely because of his loving obedience and patient suffering that God the Father exalted Jesus. The triumph of Jesus came through his apparent tragedy. In Christ's triumphant procession into Jerusalem on this day, the people hailed him as king. But they did so for the wrong reasons. They were enthusiastic in their shouts of praise because they thought that his reign would be nationalistic, political, and within the immediate future. They wanted a king who would win an earthly kingdom through war, not a king who would gain a heavenly kingdom through loving obedience, patient suffering and death. And so on Good Friday, we have this inscription on the cross, "This is the King of the Jews." But this inscription was not one of praise, it's one of mockery. In today's liturgy, we hail Christ as our King. So let's do so for the right reason. Jesus has not promised worldly peace that can be obtained from nationalistic stability, security, and prosperity, but a spiritual peace that comes from imitating His loving obedience and patient suffering. Jesus has not proposed any economic or political program that would ensure material prosperity, but a gospel way of living that guarantees eternal happiness in heaven. We have to accept Christ as King on His own terms, not on our terms. To do otherwise would be a mockery. So, sisters and brothers, let us also not be fickle, that we accept Christ as our King only when all is going well in our lives, but reject Him, doubt Him when we are faced with human pain and suffering. And always remember that all the bleak Good Fridays of our lives will lead to glorious resurrection in an eternal Easter Sunday. So, sisters and brothers, during this Holy Week, let us imitate Christ's attitude of loving obedience to God through patient suffering. This is the only way to turn apparent tragedy into triumph.